The spacecrafts were flying at about 55 kilometers over the surface, and they were able to return the best gravity map ever of any celestial body.
It was just another closed-door meeting at NASA, or at least that was how it seemed on the surface. No media, no press releases, no live stream. Only a selected group of engineers, analysts, and one retired astronaut sat around the long metal table under dimmed fluorescent lights. The man at the center, however, was not just anyone. He was a systems engineer with over 20 years of service in the agency, someone known for his silence and loyalty. But something had changed. That day, he broke his silence. The room listened in stunned silence as he spoke without slides or notes, just his voice. Calm, deliberate, and too serious to be dismissed. He began with the routine checks from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Everything was normal until around 2 months ago. The satellite captured an unusual heat signature near the south pole of the moon. Not a glitch, not a reflection, something giving off actual heat. The moon is supposed to be cold, especially in the polar regions that never see sunlight. But this spot was different. It pulsed. Slowly, as if breathing. At first, the data team assumed it was an error in the instruments. They ran diagnostics. They recalibrated. But the signal remained. Then it spread. Over the course of 2 weeks, that small heat spot expanded by nearly 400 meters. And then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Frozen. Silent. But underneath that spot, there was now a shallow indentation. Like something had risen, then settled again. He paused. Everyone stared. He was not telling a ghost story. He was showing them classified footage. Images that were never meant to leave internal servers. One photo showed what appeared to be a crack. Not a natural crack like those from meteor impacts or thermal stress. This one was sharp, jagged, and curved, almost like a sealed hatch. Not metallic, not glowing, but geometric. Too structured to be random. Then came the seismic readings. That same region began registering low-frequency tremors. The moon is not tectonically active like Earth. Moonquakes happen, but they are rare and caused mostly by meteorites or solar heating. But this pattern was different. It repeated every 6 hours like clockwork. And even more disturbing, those vibrations were vertical, not lateral. Something was pushing up from beneath. The man then played an audio file. He warned them it was filtered and amplified. The room filled with a low hum, like a vibration recorded underwater. Then came a sharp clicking sound, not mechanical, something else, rhythmic, almost like communication. Nobody spoke. Next came the footage from an old Apollo mission, one never fully released to the public. A still frame from a descent camera showed what looked like a structure in the shadowed region near Tycho crater. At the time, it was dismissed as light distortion, but enhanced with modern software, it revealed a square opening. Again, too perfect to be random, too artificial to be natural. The man explained that this footage had been archived, forgotten, and now resurfaced for analysis after the recent anomalies. Someone asked if it could be an old probe or satellite wreckage. The man shook his head. No known mission had landed or crashed there. And the size, over 200 feet wide, ruled out any human-made object. The room was quiet. Then he dropped something heavier. NASA had sent a private robotic lander to investigate. Quietly, it landed 2 weeks prior to the meeting. The probe reached the coordinates. It sent back data. Then, before completing its transmission, it shut down. No signal, no retrieval. As if something had interfered. Or worse, destroyed it. What the probe managed to send before silence was a series of thermal scans. Inside the structure, heat signatures were detected. Not rocks, not lava, something organized, rectangular zones that alternated temperature, like chambers, or walls. The next slide he showed was marked TOPSCR8 EVL5ACCSONLY. It was a blurry image, but clear enough to show something impossible. A reflection. In the probe's lens, faintly visible was the outline of what looked like a tall figure. Upright. Elongated limbs. No movement. No approach. Just standing. Motionless. Watching. Then came the final slide. It was not a photo. It was a copy of a communication log. One of the Deep Space Network relay stations had received an encrypted signal on a frequency not used by any Earth agency. The signal repeated the same sequence over and over. 3 tones, then silence, then 3 more. It lasted 9 minutes. The pattern matched no known language or probe. The man ended with a warning. He said that the moon is not what we think, that we have only scratched the surface, literally and metaphorically, and that whatever is beneath the surface is awake now. He leaned forward. No smile. No joke. Some of us believe, he said slowly, that the moon has been quiet for a reason, and we may have just broken that silence. Nobody laughed, nobody dismissed him, because deep down they knew. The data was real, the images were real, the silence from the lander was real, and now something strange had begun to move beneath the surface of our nearest neighbor in space. And this was just the beginning. Part 2. 3 days after that closed-door meeting, an internal memo was circulated quietly across several NASA departments: orbital surveillance, lunar geology, communications, and propulsion systems. The memo contained only a few lines, but the message was clear. Effective immediately, all data related to the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, Artemis relay feeds, and private lunar probes would be placed under direct oversight of a classified review board. Any unauthorized sharing of lunar surface data would be considered a breach of national security protocol. That meant only one thing: something serious had been confirmed. But the story did not stop at NASA. Across the ocean, the European Space Agency had been tracking something too. It began with laser altimeter inconsistencies over Mare Tranquillitatis. A section of the moon's flat surface had changed elevation by 1.2 meters over the span of 8 days. No impact craters, no debris, just a clean, smooth bulge rising from the regolith. European analysts ran models and confirmed it was impossible under current lunar conditions. The moon does not swell, it does not shift, and it certainly does not breathe. The news reached NASA through joint observation protocols, but strangely, when ESA followed up for confirmation, the U.S. team refused to comment. Meanwhile, back in Houston, something even stranger happened. A junior analyst working on image processing was reviewing a compressed sequence of high-resolution photos captured by the robotic lander shortly before it went dark. These images were supposed to be destroyed or sealed, but a backup server had preserved a lower-resolution cache. In one of those images, barely visible through distortion and dust, there was a shadow cast against the far wall of the structure. The lander's lights had bounced off a surface, projecting a long, thin figure onto the wall. Again, the shape was not mechanical, not a wire, not a cable, but a silhouette, upright, human-like but not human, slender, elongated arms, no helmet, no tools, no markings, just a still outline facing the probe's camera, yet standing well behind the probe. That analyst never returned to work the next day. His keycard was deactivated, his terminal wiped. Officially he had resigned, but his coworkers said he left a sticky note behind on his monitor. It read, "They're not machines." Elsewhere, in a restricted lab in California, a team of lunar mineralogists had been reviewing core samples from the moon's surface collected by previous missions. Most of the samples had been deemed ordinary, regolith, anorthosite, basalt. But one recent sample, extracted during a private contractor's unmanned mission, had a strange chemical composition. It contained iron and titanium compounds fused in a way that no known natural process could explain. Even under Earth-like conditions, it would have required sustained energy output in excess of 1,000 degrees Celsius, far higher than the moon's surface could support. More disturbing was the pattern found in the sample. Under an electron microscope, a microstructure resembling layered circuitry was visible. Not functioning, not powered, but unmistakably artificial. Some engineers suggested it was just crystallization, but one physicist was certain it looked like etched nanostructures the kind seen in advanced semiconductor materials. Why would such a thing exist beneath lunar rock? Even more unsettling, that sample emitted a faint electromagnetic pulse, pulses that repeated every 3.6 hours. And every pulse was followed by a low hum, barely audible without signal enhancement. This hum matched the audio file played during the NASA Insider's briefing, the one recorded beneath the South Pole. Different locations, same pattern, same tone. The deeper they looked, the less sense it made. Then came the Artemis anomaly. During a standard test run of future lunar communication relays, a signal was bounced off the moon's surface and expected to return to Earth in a specific interval. But the return signal came back with a 2-second delay and a strange frequency modulation that had not been part of the original signal. This echoed a technique known as signal wrapping, used in advanced encryption. Only highly intelligent systems use such behavior, not rocks, not probes, not accidents. On the same day, a retired satellite communications expert posted a vague message on a dark web forum used by ex-government contractors. The message read, "They are echoing us, copying our signals, reshaping them, sending them back as if to say, 'We understand,' or worse, 'We're listening.'" That message was removed within 2 hours. The user account deleted, but it was screenshotted and archived. People noticed. Conspiracy theorists, fringe science communities, and amateur astronomers began connecting dots that were not supposed to be public. Then came the final event of that week, the power loss. At precisely 02:43 UTC, every lunar feed from multiple satellites experienced simultaneous blackout for exactly 11 minutes. Not a single satellite malfunctioned. Not one was lost. But none received or transmitted any data during that window. When they came back online, all systems functioned normally, as if nothing had happened. But some satellites had automated logging features. And one of them, a Chinese orbiter, showed something unusual. During those 11 minutes, a massive burst of infrared light had been detected rising from the Tycho crater. One of the oldest, most massive impact sites on the moon. Infrared pulses, not visible to the human eye but sharp, powerful, and timed. 6 pulses, then a pause, then 6 more, and then silence. Some saw it as a signal. Others believed it was a warning. NASA never confirmed the event. But deep within their command center, behind locked doors, a new protocol was quietly added to their lunar exploration program. All manned missions near the South Pole and Tycho crater were postponed. No explanation was given. Equipment was redirected. Communication plans updated. Something is waking up on the moon. And the world is not ready to understand it yet. Part 3. For a while, things went quiet again. No public updates from NASA, no more leaked footage, no unusual lunar vibrations detected on seismographs. Or at least none that were shared with the public. But those on the inside knew that silence does not mean safety. It means observation. It means something or someone is waiting. In a secure monitoring room inside a research facility contracted under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known only to a select few as L4, several analysts were tasked with tracking deep space anomalies. While their official focus was communication interference, their real assignment was more delicate. Monitoring a growing concern about lunar intelligence, a possibility that for decades had been brushed off as pseudoscience. One of the lead signal analysts, a woman with a background in astrophysics and encryption, began noticing something new. In the static background noise recorded from the moon's far side, an area forever hidden from Earth's view, she isolated a repeating pattern, not just tone or pulse, but what appeared to be mathematical sequences, starting simple prime numbers, Fibonacci progression, then increasingly complex series that included quantum primes. These were not random, they were intentional. The pulses were timed perfectly, sent every 108 minutes, and shifted frequencies to avoid detection by standard monitoring systems. To someone unfamiliar with deep space frequency behavior, it would seem like normal cosmic background radiation, But to those trained in signal disruption and advanced pattern recognition, this was a broadcast. She alerted her supervisor. Within hours, she was transferred off the project. No reason, no explanation. Her security clearance was revoked, but before she left, she copied the waveform data onto a personal encrypted device. Months later, she anonymously shared it with a fringe community of researchers working out of an underground science collective in Argentina. The file was called Sequence Observer. When decrypted, the file contained not just the waveform, but a frequency modulation map, one that showed exact coordinates pointing back to a previously unrecorded hollow region beneath the Moon's south pole. The signal was coming from within the Moon, from a location that had no access, no vents, no impact craters, just solid regolith. Or so they thought. Almost exactly 2 weeks later, something unprecedented occurred. A small observatory in Chile picked up what looked like a sudden, localized flash on the Moon's surface, a thermal bloom. In the center of that bloom, measured via satellite spectrometry, was a massive release of ionized gas. That kind of release does not happen on the Moon. There are no volcanoes, no atmosphere to contain pressure, no magma activity. And yet gas had erupted. The observatory submitted the data to international space agencies. Only 2 responded. One asked for the source of the data. The other sent a formal warning about sharing unconfirmed lunar activity to the public. Days later, amateur astronomers across Europe began to notice faint but distinct lights around the same region, flickering like beacons, almost rhythmic. Using consumer-grade telescopes fitted with spectral filters, several skywatchers recorded short clips of what they believed to be flashes, pale blue and green bursts, each separated by 12 seconds. One telescope operator, a retired electrical engineer from Poland, enhanced the video and noticed a disturbing detail. The flashes were arranged in a grid, perfectly spaced, perfectly synchronized. Natural light events on the Moon, such as reflected solar flares or cosmic rays, are random. This was not. He posted his findings online, and within hours, his post was deleted. His account was banned. But once something hits the internet, it is never really gone. The video was mirrored, archived, studied. More experts, including those working anonymously, confirmed what everyone feared. These lights were not geological. They were structured. They were communicating. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came not from scientists, but from a group of linguists and anthropologists analyzing the pattern of the light pulses. They ran the intervals through software used to decode ancient symbolic languages, Sumerian Linear B Rongorongo. One researcher, fluent in pattern-based syntax, noticed something uncanny. The flashes, when mapped into binary, followed a predictable cycle, one that mirrored human DNA codons. 3 pulses pause, 3 pulses, 1 pause. Then another group, 2, 5, 7. Then an extended pause. To a casual observer, it meant nothing. To someone trained in linguistic modeling, it looked like one thing: a syntax, a written form, an intentional arrangement. The pattern repeated every night for 4 consecutive days, always starting at the exact same UTC time, 23:33. Why that time, no one knew. But it is the exact moment when the Moon is at its highest point above the equator on specific lunar days. Something only someone familiar with Earth's rotational math would know. Not a natural phenomenon, not chance coordination. And then came the last signal. It was picked up not by Earth, but by the Lunar Gateway, a new orbiting station jointly operated by NASA, the ESA, and other global partners. The Gateway had just begun its trial phase. No crew on board, only automated systems running checks. At exactly 23:33 UTC, an alert triggered inside the station. A signal had been received, but not from Earth. The Gateway's system recorded an inbound stream lasting 46 seconds, carrying over 1.8 terabytes of data in high-frequency pulse. The compression ratio was beyond what any Earth-based encryption system used. The checksum confirmed the signal had not degraded. Whatever sent it had technology far ahead of us. As engineers began decoding the message, the station experienced a system-wide reboot. Not a glitch, not a crash. A total memory purge, as if the signal itself carried a command to erase what had been received. Back on Earth, only fragments were saved before the wipe. One fragment, just 2 seconds of the full stream, contained a pattern of digital shadows arranged in an unfamiliar shape. Geometric, circular, repeating loops that interlocked like gears. Some saw it as a transmission artifact. Others saw it for what it might be, a map, not of where they are, but of where they are going next. Part 4. For the next 72 hours after the Gateway incident, a communication lockdown swept through the upper levels of multiple space agencies. Access to logs, satellite data, and even internal research archives was restricted behind new layers of encryption. Engineers who once had full access to telemetry files were now met with red screen alerts and administrative denials. Internally, whispers started to spread, words like containment, incursion protocol, and most unsettling of all, proximity breach. Though nothing was announced publicly, several missions quietly adjusted course. The next lunar lander, scheduled to launch in 3 weeks, was delayed indefinitely. Surface rover objectives were suddenly refocused away from the Tycho region and the southern pole. Even private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin received off-record advisories to pause any uncrewed test landings near those sectors of the moon. While governments locked down, the data that had already leaked to fringe communities began to evolve into something else. In the hidden corners of science forums and encrypted drop boxes, experts and amateurs alike were decoding the 2 seconds of Gateway signal that had survived the purge. One thing became increasingly clear: the signal contained more than geometry or pulse. It had weight. A data structure that implied layering, like a book with pages folded within pages. Inside one of those fragments, a cryptographic engineer from Norway discovered a series of repeating spectrographic values that, when translated into digital grayscale, revealed a single image, a smooth black sphere surrounded by concentric rings. It was not a perfect rendering, more like a scan of an object caught mid-transmission. Yet, the level of symmetry, the way the light reflected, and the sharpness of the contours suggested physicality. One physicist referred to it as structured material intelligence, theorizing it could be a technology so advanced that it no longer needed components or wiring, only shape. The object looked inert, but several frames suggested motion blur, as if the sphere had been rotating or shifting during the capture. Based on triangulated data, it appeared to be located, at least at the time of the signal, in a hollow beneath the moon's south pole, a region previously believed to be solid lunar crust. This image, once passed through filtering software, began to hint at something more frightening. The sphere was not alone. Faint outlines around its lower half showed other forms, not mechanical, not clear enough to confirm, but dense, clustered, a formation, as if waiting. Then came the ripple. Earth's magnetosphere recorded a subtle but measurable disturbance exactly 7 hours after the Gateway signal was received. The anomaly was localized. A gentle pulse that bent magnetometers in ways similar to solar flares, yet there had been no solar activity. The pulse originated from the moon's direction and reached Earth's upper atmosphere in a wave that lasted 28 seconds. Scientists chalked it up to interplanetary noise, but a few quietly ran the numbers. The pulse carried a repeating interval, one that matched the exact data packet size of the Gateway's corrupted signal. They were still transmitting, not just once, not as a message in a bottle, but continuously, silently, like a heartbeat beneath rock and dust. At this point, the silence among governments became its own answer. Agencies stopped issuing moon-related briefings. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter's live data feed went dark, labeled as maintenance, indefinitely. Private satellite companies noticed entire sections of the moon now returned blank tiles during surface sweeps. and when a team of independent astronomers tried to launch a high-altitude balloon to capture real-time optical video of the Tycho region, their payload lost contact mid-flight despite having a functioning transponder and redundant GPS. They never found the balloon. They never recovered the data. But what they did find weeks later was more terrifying than any missing equipment. During a mid-latitude lunar observation session in Arizona, a group of graduate students working with infrared telescopes picked up a sudden cold void near the southern terminator line. The temperature in that region dropped sharply, not by a few degrees, but by nearly 40 degrees C in under 2 minutes. The moon should not do that. It does not have the weather, pressure, or fluid dynamics to support sudden thermal collapses. One of the students, unsure what he had captured, ran the footage through a motion stabilizer. What appeared on his screen was not a drop, but a distortion, a shadow. Large, oval-shaped, not a crater, not an object sitting on the surface, but one floating above it. They replayed the footage dozens of times. The object seemed to move without altering its shape, perfectly still, as if gliding just meters above the regolith. And then, before disappearing, it paused as if it noticed the lens. The image was saved, copied, shared quietly. But the source telescope went offline 2 days later. When the university's IT department checked the server logs, they found a remote access protocol had been triggered from an unknown location. The footage was intact, but every copy uploaded to cloud storage had been corrupted, files overwritten with strings of binary code that translated to a single repeating phrase. WESEOU. No one knew if it was a prank. No one could explain how it had been done remotely with military-grade access. The researchers were told to move on. The telescope was reassigned, and that footage, like so many others, was buried under warnings, suspicion, and fear. But not everyone could move on. In hushed conversations between astrophysicists and intelligence contractors, a theory had begun to spread. One that, if true, would change everything. The moon is not just a satellite, it is a shell, a veil, and something beneath that veil has started to awaken. Part 5. Not long after the thermal distortion incident, a former contractor for the U.S. Geological Survey, who had worked with NASA on lunar mapping in the early 2000s, came forward anonymously. He uploaded a data package on a secure leak site, labeled tunnels. The files inside were not typical schematics or images. They were echo mapping analyses, deep penetration radar sweeps of the moon, gathered over several years and never released publicly. These maps showed sub-surface inconsistencies, massive cavern-like voids stretching from the Tycho crater down into regions that had always been assumed to be solid bedrock. What startled experts was not just the size of these voids, but their shape.